Robert Harrison sat in his study, staring at the financial reports spread across his mahogany desk. 72 years old, self-made billionaire, owner of Harrison Industries, father of 4, husband of 35 years, and completely alone, not physically. His mansion in Melbourne was full of people, his wife, his children, staff, noise, activity, but alone in the way that matters. The way that makes you wonder if anyone would care if you disappeared tomorrow. Robert had built an empire from nothing, started with a small shipping business in Sydney, expanded into logistics, then manufacturing, then real estate. By the time he was 50, he was worth over $200 million. He'd given his family everything: private schools, luxury cars, overseas holidays, whatever they wanted. But lately, he'd started noticing things, small things that added up to something bigger. His wife, Margaret, barely spoke to him anymore. When she did, it was about money, about buying a new property in Gold Coast, about renovating the holiday house in Noosa. His eldest son, Thomas, ran the Australian division of the company. But Robert had seen the reports: money disappearing, questionable expenses, deals that didn't make sense. His second son, Michael, lived in London, called once a month, always needed money for some investment opportunity that never quite worked out. His daughter, Charlotte, was 32 and still living off his money, shopping, parties, a different boyfriend every few months. And then there was Emma, his youngest, 24 years old, quiet, always reading, working as a teacher even though she didn't need to. Emma was different, but Robert couldn't quite figure out how or why. So he made a decision, a test, a cruel one, maybe, but necessary. He was going to fake his own terminal illness and see who really loved him. Robert called his lawyer first. Daniel Chen had been his legal advisor for 20 years. Trustworthy, discreet. "Daniel, I need your help with something unusual." They met at a private club in the city, away from the office, away from anyone who might overhear. "I'm going to pretend to be dying," Robert said simply. Daniel looked at him for a long moment. Then he set down his whiskey. "Explain." Robert laid out the plan. He would claim to have stage 4 pancreatic cancer, 6 months to live. He'd play the part convincingly. Weak, tired, declining health. "But here's the important part," Robert continued. "I need you to help me hide half my assets, transfer them into trusts, offshore accounts, make it look like I only have half of what I actually have." "Why?" "Because I want to see what happens when they think there's less money to inherit." Robert's voice was bitter. "I want to see who stays for me and who stays for the money." Daniel was quiet. Then he nodded. "I'll help you. But Robert, what if the answer is what you fear? Then at least I'll know the truth." The next person Robert recruited was his doctor. Patricia Morgan had been his physician for 15 years. She knew his real health was perfect for a man his age. "Dr. Morgan, I need you to lie to my family." He explained the plan. She would diagnose him with terminal cancer. Give him 6 months. Make it convincing. Patricia hesitated. "This is highly unethical." "I know, but I need to know the truth about my family. Please." She looked at him, saw the pain behind his eyes, the loneliness. "6 months, she said finally. "After 6 months, you end this. One way or another. Deal." Everything was set. Daniel had already started moving assets. Dr. Morgan had prepared the medical files. Now came the hardest part. Telling his family. Robert gathered them all in the main living room. Margaret, Thomas, Michael, who'd flown in from London for what he thought was a business meeting, Charlotte, and Emma. "Thank you all for coming," Robert began. He sat in his favorite chair, looking older than usual, tired. He'd practiced this. "Dr. Morgan, please." Dr. Morgan stepped forward, wearing her professional mask. "I'm afraid I have difficult news. Robert has been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It's advanced, aggressive. We've explored all treatment options." "What does that mean?" Margaret's voice was sharp, scared. "It means he has approximately 6 months to live. I'm very sorry." The room erupted. Charlotte burst into tears immediately. "Daddy, no!" Thomas went pale, gripping the arm of the couch. Michael just stared, his mouth open. Margaret covered her face with her hands. And Emma sat very still, her face unreadable. Then, quietly, she stood and walked to Robert's chair, kneeling beside him and taking his hand. "Dad," Emma's voice was steady. We'll get through this. Together. Robert squeezed her hand, feeling genuine emotion for the first time in this performance. Thank you, sweetheart. The first week was exactly what Robert expected. Everyone was attentive, concerned, present. Margaret barely left his side. Thomas canceled meetings. Charlotte moved back into the mansion temporarily. Even Michael delayed his return to London. Emma took a leave of absence from her teaching job and stayed in the house, sleeping in the guest room next to Robert's. But Robert wasn't fooled. He watched. He waited. And he was right to wait. By the second week, things started to change. Margaret stopped coming to his room as often. She'd poke her head in, ask if he needed anything, then disappear to have lunch with her friends. Thomas went back to work full-time. Actually, more than full-time. He was at the office constantly. Charlotte returned to her apartment but came for dinner most nights, always asking about the will, about the estate planning, about what would happen to the properties. Michael flew back to London, promising to return soon. Only Emma stayed. Every day, every night, reading to him, bringing him tea, just sitting quietly when he didn't want to talk. Dad, Emma said one afternoon, shouldn't we get a second opinion? Try some experimental treatments? There's a clinic in Germany that specializes in pancreatic cancer. Robert, playing his part, shook his head weakly. It's too expensive, sweetheart. And the doctors say it won't help. I don't care about the cost. Emma's voice was fierce. You're my father. I appreciate that. But I've made my peace with this. Emma looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She just held his hand tighter. By the third week, the masks were fully off. Robert had installed cameras throughout the house, hidden, recording everything. Daniel had arranged it all. And what Robert saw broke his heart. Thomas had taken over as acting CEO, and within days, he'd fired 3 of Robert's most loyal executives, people who'd been with the company for decades. Why? Because they questioned Thomas's decisions, his expensive new office renovation, his decision to sell off a profitable division to a competitor, his massive salary increase for himself. Robert watched the camera footage of Thomas in the boardroom. My father built this company, but he's from a different era. It's time to modernize. Time to make the hard decisions he was too sentimental to make. The board members nodded. They didn't dare disagree with the boss's son. Charlotte was worse. She'd started selling family heirlooms, artwork, jewelry, furniture. Robert watched her on camera talking to an antique dealer. Yes, this was my grandmother's. I know it's valuable. How much can you give me? But Miss Harrison, your father is still alive. Does he know you're selling this? Charlotte's smile was cold. My father is dying. He won't need these things. And frankly, I need the money now. She took the cash and went shopping. Bought a new car, a BMW, $50,000. Michael was calling from London constantly, but not to check on Robert, to talk to Thomas about the will. Robert heard the phone calls through the cameras. Listen, Tom, we need to make sure the London properties are protected. Dad might try to leave everything to Emma. She's always been his favorite. Don't worry, Thomas replied. I've already talked to a lawyer about contesting the will if needed. They were planning, strategizing. Before he was even dead, Margaret was the final blow. Robert had suspected for a while, the way she dressed up when she went out, the new perfume, the phone calls she took in private. The cameras confirmed it. A man, younger than Robert by at least 15 years, named James. Tall, handsome, charming. Margaret met him at hotels, expensive restaurants. She laughed with him in a way she hadn't laughed with Robert in years. Robert watched the footage one night, alone in his study, watched his wife of 35 years kiss another man, plan a future with him. Just a few more months, Margaret said on camera. Then, I'll be free, with more money than I know what to do with. James grinned. We'll travel, see the world. No more pretending to care about a dying old man. They laughed. Robert turned off the screen, sat in the dark for a long time. Then he looked at the other monitor, the one showing Emma's room. She was sitting on her bed, reading a medical journal about pancreatic cancer treatments, taking notes, researching. She looked up as if sensing something, staring at the wall in Robert's direction. Hang in there, Dad, she whispered to the empty room. I won't give up on you. Robert felt tears on his face. The first he'd cried since his mother died 30 years ago. One person, 1 out of 5, one child out of 4 who actually loved him. It was time for phase 2. Emma knocked on his door early one morning. Dad, I've been thinking, this house is making you sicker. All the stress, the noise, the people constantly asking about business. Robert looked at her. Go on. What if we went away? Just you and me. To your family's old place in the Adelaide Hills. Remember? The small house where you grew up. Robert did remember. He'd kept the property, maintained it, visited occasionally when he needed to think. Why would we do that? Because maybe the slower pace will help. Maybe being away from all this will give you peace. Emma's eyes were earnest. And honestly, Dad, I think some of the people here are making things worse. She didn't say names, but Robert knew she meant her mother and siblings. All right, he said. Let's go. When Robert announced he was leaving with Emma, the reactions were telling. Margaret was relieved. Oh, that sounds wonderful. The fresh air will do you good. I'll stay here and manage things. Thomas barely looked up from his phone. Yeah, sure. Whatever you need, Dad. I've got the company handled. Charlotte pouted. But Dad, what about me? I wanted to spend time with you. You can visit, Robert said, knowing she wouldn't. Only Emma smiled. Really? You'll come? Really? They left 2 days later, Emma driving Robert's old Land Rover, the one he'd kept from his younger days. As they drove away from Melbourne, Robert felt lighter, freer. Emma played music. Old songs Robert loved. They didn't talk much, just drove. The house in Adelaide Hills was exactly as Robert remembered. Small, simple, surrounded by gum trees and open sky. Nothing like the mansion. Nothing like the empire he'd built. It felt like coming home. Emma settled him into the main bedroom, made tea, opened windows to let in fresh air. The neighbors came by. Old families who'd known Robert when he was young, before the money, before everything. Robert Harrison, Mrs. Chen from next door gasped. I heard you were unwell. We're so glad you're here. They brought food, sat with him, told old stories, asked about Emma, didn't care about his money or his company, just cared about him. For the first time in months, Robert felt like himself again. Emma took care of everything, cooking, cleaning, managing his supposed medications. She even found a local herbalist, a kind old woman named Linda, who made special teas. These won't cure the cancer, Linda said gently, not knowing it was fake, but they'll ease the pain, give you energy, help you rest. Robert drank the teas. They actually made him feel good, better than he'd felt pretending to be sick. One evening, about 3 weeks into their stay, Robert was sitting on the porch watching the sunset. Emma came out with 2 cups of tea and sat beside him. Dad, can I tell you something? Of course. Emma was quiet for a moment. I know what they're doing. Thomas, Charlotte, even Michael. I've seen the reports, the sales, the spending, the changes at the company. Robert's heart stopped. You know? Emma nodded. I'm not blind, and I'm not stupid. They think you're dying, so they're grabbing everything they can. Are you angry? At them? Yes. Emma's voice was fierce. At you? No. I understand why you're letting it happen. Robert stared at her. Do you? Emma turned to face him fully. Dad, I've always known you didn't need that mansion, or the yachts, or any of it. You kept that stuff because you thought it would make us happy, but it just made us greedy. Except you. Except me, Emma agreed. Because I had you, the real you, the man who taught me to fish in that creek over there, the man who read me stories, the man who came to every single school play even when you were exhausted. Robert's throat was tight. I don't care about the money, Dad. I care about you. Emma took his hand. And if you are really dying, I want these last months to count. I want to know you, not your empire. Robert looked at his youngest daughter and made a decision. Emma, I need to tell you something. He told her everything. The fake diagnosis, the hidden assets, the test, the cameras, everything. Emma listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she started laughing. Not mean laughter, almost relieved laughter. Oh, Dad, Emma wiped her eyes. That's the most paranoid, manipulative, brilliant thing I've ever heard. You're not angry? Are you kidding after what they've been doing? Emma shook her head. They deserve whatever's coming. But Dad, you're okay? Really okay? Healthiest I've been in years. Emma hugged him. Tight. Relief and joy and love all mixed together. Then we have work to do, she said, because I think it's time they learned the truth. They stayed in Adelaide Hills for 2 more weeks, planning, recovering. Robert actually did recover from the stress, the loneliness, the weight of pretending. He gained weight. His color came back. He felt strong. Mrs. Chen commented on it. "Robert, you look wonderful. That herbalist is a miracle worker." Robert smiled. "She is indeed." Finally, it was time to return to Melbourne. But first, Robert called Daniel. "Is everything ready?" Daniel's voice on the phone was satisfied. Every camera, every recording, every document, all organized and backed up. "When do you want to do this?" "Tomorrow. We're coming home. They'll be shocked." "Good." Robert and Emma drove back to Melbourne on a sunny Thursday morning. Emma had called ahead, told Margaret they were returning, that Robert wanted to see everyone. Important family meeting. When they pulled up to the mansion, Emma grinned at her father. "Ready?" Robert nodded. "Let's do this." Emma helped him out of the car. But this time, Robert didn't shuffle, didn't lean on her. He walked straight, strong, healthy. They opened the front door. The family was gathered in the main living room. Margaret, Thomas, Charlotte. Michael had flown in, probably thinking this was about the will. They all turned to look, and their faces were priceless. Margaret dropped her wine glass. It shattered on the marble floor. Thomas stood up, mouth open. Charlotte actually gasped. Michael whispered, "What the hell?" Because Robert didn't look like a dying man. He looked healthy, strong, alive. "Hello, family," Robert said calmly. "Shall we talk?" No one spoke. They just stared. Emma walked to the entertainment center and pulled out a laptop, plugged it into the large-screen TV. The first video started playing. Thomas in the boardroom, firing loyal employees, selling company divisions, increasing his own salary. Thomas went white. The second video, Charlotte selling family heirlooms, buying luxury items, laughing about her father dying. Charlotte started crying. "Daddy, I can explain." The third video, Michael on the phone with Thomas, planning to contest the will, making sure they got the London properties. Michael looked sick. The fourth video, Margaret with James, at a hotel, kissing, planning their future, counting down the days until Robert died. Margaret made a sound like a wounded animal. Robert stood in the center of the room, looking at each of them. "I was never sick," he said quietly. "It was a test to see who really loved me and who just loved my money." The room was silent. "Turns out, only one of you passed." Robert put his arm around Emma. "Only one of you saw me as a person instead of a bank account." "Dad?" Thomas started. "I can explain." "Can you?" Robert's voice was cold. "Can you explain why you fired people who'd been loyal to me for decades? Why you started selling off parts of my company? Why you increased your salary by 300%? Thomas had no answer. Robert turned to Charlotte. "Can you explain why you sold your grandmother's jewelry? The paintings from my parents' house? Things that had sentimental value, not just monetary?" Charlotte sobbed. "I needed money." "I gave you money," Robert's voice rose. "I gave you everything, and still you stole from me while I was supposedly dying." He looked at Michael. "And you, planning to contest my will before I'm even dead, making sure you got your share." Michael stared at the floor. Finally, Robert turned to Margaret. "And you, my wife of 35 years, planning your future with another man, counting down the days until you'd be free." Margaret's face was a mess of tears and makeup. "Robert, please." "I don't want to hear it." Robert's voice was final. "Here's what's going to happen. Thomas, you're fired. Effective immediately. You're removed from all company positions. You'll receive a severance package. Nothing more." Thomas opened his mouth to protest, but Robert held up his hand. "Charlotte, your trust fund is suspended. You'll receive a stipend, enough to live modestly. That's it. Everything you've taken, you'll pay back or work off." Charlotte collapsed onto the couch. "Michael, the London properties will be sold. You'll receive nothing from the sale. Consider it payment for your planning and scheming." Michael looked like he might be sick. "And Margaret," Robert's voice was the coldest for her. "I'm filing for divorce. You'll get what the prenup stipulates, nothing more. And James, he's welcome to you, but he won't be getting my money." Margaret couldn't even speak. Robert turned to Emma. "Everything else goes to Emma. The company, the properties, the investments, because she's the only one who saw me instead of dollar signs." Emma looked uncomfortable. "Dad, I don't need all of that." "I know you don't. That's why you're getting it. Robert smiled at her. Because you're the only one who would use it wisely, who would take care of people, who understands that money is a tool, not a goal. He looked around the room one last time. You all had a choice, to love me or to love my money. You chose wrong. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Thomas stood up. Fine, fine. You want to know the truth? You were never a father. You were a wallet. That's all you ever were to us. Robert met his son's eyes. And that's the saddest thing you could say. Because it means I failed you. I gave you everything except the one thing that mattered. I never taught you that people matter more than things. Is that supposed to make us feel better? Charlotte's voice was bitter through her tears. No, it's supposed to make you think. Robert walked toward the door. Emma followed. Security will escort you all out. You have 1 week to remove your personal belongings. After that, the locks will be changed. You can't do this! Margaret found her voice. I can. And I am. Robert opened the door. Goodbye. He walked out of the mansion he'd built, Emma beside him. Behind them, the family erupted in shouts and arguments and tears. But Robert didn't look back. 6 months later, Robert sat in his new home. Not the mansion. A comfortable house in the Adelaide Hills, near the old family place. Emma visited every weekend. She'd taken over the company and was running it better than Thomas ever had, treating employees well, making ethical decisions, growing the business sustainably. She'd also started a foundation, using Robert's money to help underprivileged kids go to college. Kids like Robert had been, once upon a time. Dad, Emma said one Saturday afternoon, I have news. What's that? Thomas got a job. A real job. Sales position at a tech company. He's actually working his way up, legitimately. Robert raised his eyebrows. Good for him. And Charlotte enrolled in a nursing program. She wants to help people. That's wonderful. Michael's still in London, but he called. Said he's been thinking about things. About his choices. Emma smiled. He asked if he could visit sometime. Not for money. Just to talk. Robert was quiet. Then he nodded. He's welcome. If he's genuine, I think he is. People can change. If they want to. And your mother? Emma's smile faded. Living with James. I don't think she's happy, but she made her choice. She did. They sat in comfortable silence. Do you regret it? Emma asked. The test? The way you did it? Robert thought about it. I regret that it was necessary, that I had to trick my own family to see their true nature. But no, I don't regret doing it, because now I know the truth. And truth, however painful, is better than living a lie. Emma took his hand. I'm glad you did it too, because now we can build something real, not based on money or obligation, but on genuine love. Robert squeezed her hand. You're a wise woman, Emma Harrison. I learned from the best. Outside, the sun was setting over the hills. The air was clean. The world was quiet. And for the first time in years, Robert Harrison felt truly wealthy. Not because of his bank account, but because he had one person who loved him for who he was. And that, he realized, was worth more than all the money in the world. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones we teach ourselves. Robert Harrison thought he was testing his family, but in the end, he learned something too. That love can't be bought, that family isn't always blood, and that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what really matters. His empire continued, his wealth remained, but none of it mattered as much as those quiet Saturday afternoons with Emma, reading, talking, simply being together. The mansion in Melbourne sold for $30 million. Robert donated half to charity, used the rest to fund Emma's foundation. Thomas eventually reconciled with his father. Not easily, not quickly, but over years of hard work and genuine change, he became a better man, a better father to his own children. Charlotte finished nursing school and now works in a hospital in Brisbane. She visits twice a year. The relationship is still strained, but it's real. Michael stayed distant. Some bridges can't be rebuilt, but he sends cards on birthdays, small gestures that show he's trying. Margaret never called, never apologized. The divorce was finalized. She married James. They moved to Queensland. Robert heard through mutual friends that the relationship was rocky, that James had expected more money, that Margaret realized too late what she'd lost. But Robert didn't gloat. He just felt sad. Sad that it had come to this. Sad that love had been so conditional. But grateful too. Grateful for Emma. grateful for the truth, grateful for a second chance to live authentically. On his 75th birthday, Robert threw a small party, just Emma and a few close friends, the neighbors from Adelaide Hills, Mrs. Chen and her husband, Linda the herbalist, Daniel the lawyer, Dr. Morgan the doctor who'd helped with the deception. They ate simple food, told stories, laughed. No gold-plated anything, no champagne that cost thousands, no designer clothes, just real people, real love, real connection. As the sun set, Emma proposed a toast. To my father, who taught me that the only wealth worth having is the wealth you can't spend. The wealth of genuine relationships, real love, true integrity. Everyone raised their glasses. Robert looked around the room, at these people who cared about him, who'd stuck by him, who saw him, and he realized something profound. He'd spent 50 years building an empire, accumulating wealth, chasing success. But the last 3 years since the test, living simply, loving authentically, those had been the richest years of his life. Thank you, he said simply. All of you, for seeing me. Emma hugged him tight. We always did, Dad. We always will. And in that moment, Robert Harrison was the wealthiest man in the world. This story isn't about revenge. It's not even really about testing family. It's about the question we all have to ask ourselves. Are the people in our lives there for us, or for what we can give them? Robert Harrison asked that question, got an answer he didn't want, but found something better in the process. He found that one genuine relationship is worth more than 1,000 shallow ones. That simplicity beats complexity. That love freely given is the only kind worth having. If this story moved you, think about your own relationships. Are they transactional, or are they real? Do people love you, or what you represent? And more importantly, do you love others for who they are, or what they can do for you? These are hard questions, but necessary ones. Thank you for staying with Robert and Emma through this journey. Their story reminds us that family is more than blood, that loyalty can't be bought, and that sometimes the hardest test we ever take is the one we give ourselves. Hit that subscribe button if this story made you think. Leave a comment telling me about a time someone showed you who they really were. Share this with someone who needs to hear this message today. And remember, the truest wealth isn't in your bank account. It's in the hearts of the people who love you for you. This is Tell Sunnac. Real stories, real emotions, real lessons. See you in the next one.